Pipeline Report. I'll be with Zach Karskatten here in just a minute. We welcome you here on this Monday, the 27th day of October, 2025. Hope you had a good weekend. Sorry, was out the last couple of weeks, traveling. Got a bunch of stuff to cover today. The crisis of the shutdown, the government shutdown is going to be our main topic today. We also have Israel, the mayor's election in New York, and much more. So let's tune in. Let's listen to the Pipeline Report today. Thanks for joining us. Well, here we are. We're with you. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for coming each day. Please share this with your friends if you'd like to. You can just share a share link if you're on the YouTube page or Facebook, our Pipeline Facebook page, as well as Rumble. And we are so glad to be on those platforms sharing this message, this show that we do each Monday at 12 noon. Just trying to help you vet the news and help navigate through all that is going on in the earth. And so this crisis of the shutdown is upon us right now. We are going to see some major hits if something is not resolved this week. So we want to really help you be informed, but also ask you to pray with us. I'm praying that the right thing will be done. And, you know, the blame game is very strong right now. We see that everywhere. And there's a lot of blame to go around. The fact that we even got to this position goes way beyond this Congress. It goes way back many Congresses ago. I personally have lobbied for these bills, these budget bills, many times in the last 10, 15 years. We've been in Congress, lobbying Congress, and we have continued what we call these continuing resolutions year after year after year, both whether it's Republican or Democrat in the White House. So this is a long-term problem. It's just really manifesting. We surpassed the 38 trillion debt ceiling last week. So here we are getting in greater debt. And you got to understand, we have to service that debt. Other nations, China and others, buy our debt, and then we have to pay interest on that. And we're getting to a very critical stage where this is going to really eat into our economy if we don't turn the tide soon on this. I know the president's trying tariffs and all, but there's a backside of that that we're not even thinking about that's happening. And when you talk to people in the nations, you understand that. Well, we always try to bring up Israel first, as always. As you know, the truce is somewhat holding. There have been some strikes by the IDF. Secretary of State Rubio said they did not break the truce, that they stayed within the boundaries of the truce when they were doing that. You see the bodies are not all being returned, and there's many reasons for that we don't know about, but there's little by little. I think they're supposed to be turning in a body today to kind of align with the truce to stay out of trouble with President Trump. President Trump has said that, you know, if they don't act out soon and do what's right, that other forces will go into Gaza and begin to deal with this issue. The king of Jordan yesterday stated that that is not going to happen, that there is no forces in the Middle East that want to be a part of that want to be underneath the Palestinian Authority and kind of partnering with them. They have no desire. He said there's not a country that will do that. And the fact that all they want to do is train Palestinians to rule their own region, and that's as far as they're willing to go. Jordan is, Egypt, some of these other countries. So some of this idea is a little bit of pie in the sky idea that it's not going to work on the ground. And you understand, if you put a security force in there from Egypt or Jordan or somewhere, the Palestinians are still in authority, and your security forces are going to just be henchmen, if you want to call it that way, for the Palestinian authorities, and you're going to be the bad guy. Okay, they'll tell you, hey, these are some bad guys, go kill them or do this to them, and they don't want to be a part of that. Nobody wants to be a part of that right now. So we have some major problems in the Gaza Strip. This truce has lots of holes in it. And I mean, we're thankful. We just give thanks to the Lord that the living hostages were released, and that we have to say, okay, if God used that, then so be it. But now we have to deal with what's on the ground. Um, Israel's in a real predicament because uh, the American government wants to dictate who goes in there. They've suggested countries like Qatar and Turkey, which is totally, absolutely unacceptable to the Israelis. And so you may have a real tension moment. There was also last week, they talked about annexing Judea and Samaria, which belongs biblically to Israel. And President Trump said he's not going to allow that to happen. Again, you have a real tension there. And this could really affect the American-Israeli relationship majorly. You know, there's sometimes I think there's no way we'll be a part of dividing the land. Well, no way America will be a part of standing against Israel, but we are starting to see the signs that that possibly could happen. We also seen data now on the far right, uh, among the MAGA movement, especially among the Gen Zers and the younger generation, that they are beginning to become more anti-Israel. The Candace Owens and the Tucker Carlsons are starting to affect their way they think. And so we're starting to see a real deterioration among the younger generation. So, one, let's pray for that. But also, if you have an opportunity to speak into the young generation, begin to share your wisdom and your revelation about covenant Israel and why we stand with them and how biblically God's going to honor that as we do that. So that's the main front on the Israel issue. There's a lot going on, but we got to pray into that. So let's shift now. Zach, if you want to speak anything before I move on to the Gen Zers and this movement with Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, really influence, and not just them, but people like them influencing the younger generation. And we're starting to see a shift about that generation. This is a very deep concern of mine, because if we don't have a generation upcoming that's going to do the right thing, we could see us fulfilling the mandate or the scripture that says that all the nations will come against Israel in Joel chapter 3.
The concerning thing is the growing movement of younger males, 18 to 25, who they're having an open ear to the likes of the names that you mentioned. And the concerning thing is some of those names are saying you need to think for yourself. You need to ask questions. The problem is they themselves aren't asking the questions. They're being fed this information from a certain source, and they're not being open about what source that information is coming from. And you're seeing that with Tucker Carlson last week, where he's coming out accepting some pretty nefarious money and awards and different things of that nature, because before he wasn't asking these questions, and then now all of a sudden he has these relationships, and the donors themselves are proud that Tucker's doing what they're doing. And when you go talk to former Muslims and who look at this stuff, and they say the Islamists love people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens because they're the useful idiots of the right. They're not looking at the facts on the ground. They're not looking at any situations. I mean, I've listened to debate after debate after debate. The recent one I'm kind of going through right now is with Coleman Hughes from the Free Press and libertarian openist comedian Dave Smith. And Dave Smith is being presented with facts from Coleman Hughes about the realities of the situation that happened in Gaza, that have happened throughout Israel, have happened with some of the conspiracies here, that lead back to QAnon and other things that a lot of people are hanging their hats on. And it's just factually not true. And Coleman Hughes just very politely says, no, this is wrong. That's you can't say these things based off of certain standards. And he just, well, okay, maybe that part's not true, but I believe this. And it's, pride comes before the fall. And the reality is you can't, the hard thing is with these people, that you can't you can't break through to them. The only thing that'll break through to them is the Lord, and it'll be a miracle. But the reality is the fallout of that is on the growing coalition that was coming together in America behind a Judeo-Christian worldview that is now being torn apart. And part of the good thing about that is you're learning who the sheep and the goat are, of who one stands with Israel, but who also stands with America. Because there's something that can be done is you can walk and chew gum at the same time. For President Trump, he can be America first, but then he can also understand that having Israel is as an ally is a very strong proponent. I go back to what I talked about last week, the things such as the Barbary pirates. And then you go in and you can also talk about how the US had to have a whole section of its navy. Matt Walsh just talked about this, that policed slavery on the western coast of Africa because the Muslim nations there on the western coast of Africa continued slavery. And that was America fighting against it. America fighting against Barbary pirates, which is why you have the Navy in and of itself, which why you have, from the Swords of Tripoli and the Marines fight song. And when Thomas Jefferson was president in 1804, of going there and fighting these ideals. And the reason I say that is because this gets to this isolationist movement that a lot of these libertarians, old school Democrats, tend to think is the way forward. The Rand Paul revolution. The problem with that is, one, America wouldn't exist as a nation if it didn't have allies, i.e., the French, and so we're having to really go back and understand our history and our founding. And the big thing is, well, we're just asking questions. Well, the question that is being asked of them, but it's like, okay, but why aren't you looking at both sides? Look at the positive and negative from both sides. A portion of the things that they're saying about the right of, and even Charlie Kirk said this before he passed away, of like, look, if Israel is such a great military nation, how did October 7th happen? I'm listening to the book from Douglas Murray about the October 7th incident, and it's very clear. Israel shifted from a nation of understanding you have to have strong borders to one administration, and not even a full term within the administration. And we can talk about that, of to where, oh, they're just peace loving people. We just want to get, they just want to get, economic status. They're just poor. They need help. And they did that, and they put their guard down. And the people who were affected the most were the people who lived along the border, who were peace loving people. What you're finding in these stories of those who were slaughtered is they left their doors open. And there were plans that were found from some of the survivors of the IDF who went in immediately after the fact, that they found on the intruders, where they had detailed plans of the villages that they were told to go into, what houses to go into, what to do to the men and women and children in those villages, specifically by name. And the reason I bring this up is because you have people who are out there debating and defending the Palestinians. Well, Israel just wants to commit a genocide of 2 million people. The reality is, when you look back to any nation in the Middle East, of the Christian and or Jewish population in those nations since 1948 and 1918, it has dwindled to nothing. Whereas in Israel, the Arab Muslim population and Christian population, the Palestinian, more so like Egyptian, Syrian population in those countries has blossomed within Israel and under Israel's control. And the issue Israel's having to face right now, and they're coming to the realization, whether JD Vance likes it or not, is that they want to take back their country in Judea, Samaria, and within Gaza. And the reality is, circling back to the Gen Z, the younger generation, is they're starting to ask questions, and it's good. The questions that they're asking aren't necessarily bad, but I think we have to do a better job of educating them. And Ted Cruz did a really good job this last weekend, or the weekend before last, about explaining why we support Israel, about the benefits, military benefits we get from the Iron Dome, the spending that we give, the research and intelligence that we get back, of things that have been prevented from the intelligence that we get back from the Mossad and Israel, and the sharing there and the relationship there, and why it's beneficial. And that $3 billion a year is pennies in the buckets to our $1 trillion budget that we have here in America, and you can go look at how much we give to Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, other African countries, other South American countries, but nobody's saying anything about that. Why is it Israel? I think we understand that here, and the reality is the younger generation has to realize, more so, to think for themselves rather than to just think hook, line, and sinker what they're being told from people that they've liked in the past, who've been right in the past on certain things. And the question is what we're seeing is when these people go out on their own, you can kind of see when they're put in a thought process. Because when they were at Daily Wire with Candace Owens, when Tucker Carlson was even at CNN, MSNBC and Fox, they were able to bounce ideas off of people, and people were say, "Okay, you have this point of view. Well, here's the facts. Let's go through this." And when now that they've isolated themselves, they've put themselves in a position to navel gaze, if you want to put, and I'm right. What I say goes, and I can't be challenged to the other to where Tucker Carlson brings on somebody who says the Holocaust is not a bad thing and it didn't happen. Like this is just utterly absurd, and bringing on General who's said certain things that just are factually untrue. And so there's a reality here that people have to break through these lies that are there, and there's information out there. And Charlie was doing a great job. Turning Point was doing a great job of that, and hopefully, and what's sad most of all is that they're trying to burn down what was this momentum that was built, that was bringing good information to younger generations. And the question is, who's going to fill the vacuum? And the biggest question of all is when Charlie Kirk died, okay, now it's a vacuum and people are trying to fill it. And these young people are going to have to figure out, who do they go to? Do they go to a person or do they go to the Lord? And I think that's the biggest thing we got to pray for, is that they find what they're looking for through the Holy Spirit and through the Lord and through Scripture, rather than just continuing to seek out information from the voices of men.
And I think also the younger generation, especially like in New York, is a great example of the Zohan Mandani movement. Is the young people are gravitating to him. One, he's promising them everything free. It's the old politician who comes, who's going to get more votes, who offers ice cream or truth, and he's offering them ice cream, and there's no solution. He gives no antidotes on how he's going to pay for free grocery stores, free housing, lower housing, etc., things like that. And this is a dangerous thing. There was an op piece in Ynet Global, which is an Israeli news agency, and it said that why they believe he's the greatest threat to global Jewry in the 21st century. And if you're watching the election in New York, unfortunately, the one Republican that's running, he's an angel, whatever they call those angels that work the subways and stuff, and he refuses to step out. He has like 15% of the vote. He refuses to drop out, and he just says in his polls that want head to head, he will beat Mandani. Well, he has Cuomo in there. He's not going to go head to head. And I want to say this for somebody, I've worked with politicians as far as people trying to run for office. There is a spirit that gets on them, a political spirit that blinds them to truth. They actually believe somehow supernaturally they're going to win, and then they'll do what's right. It's a spirit. It consumes them. I've looked them direct in the face when they're polling less than 10%, and I say, look, you're not going to win. One, I know it by the numbers, but I also know it by the spirit. And they'll look me straight in the face and say, no, that's not true. I'm going to win. I mean, literally, it's a spirit that gets on them. And I believe that in New York case, that's what's happening there with the Republican candidate. Como is just, he's now got the support. Mayor Adams endorsed him last week. They're trying to get momentum. It will not happen unless the Republican drops out. And so we are probably going to get our first communist mayor in America, a full-blown communist. He says he's a democratic socialist, and that's a contradiction of statements. It'd be like me saying I'm a Buddhist Christian. You can't be both. You're one or the other. Either you're a socialist or you're a Democrat, and he's not a Democrat, that's for sure. And even in his socialism views, they're much worse than most. They are bent toward a communist point of view. And George Will said that, good, let him be mayor. He said every 20 years, the Democrats need to go through this process where they think they can do this and watch it utterly fail. The problem is the government can bail him out of many of these situations, which they did for Obama, they did in St. Louis, and they did other places where these were failed policies. Chicago, because their mayor's the same way. But the government, they use COVID money, they use all sorts of different types of money to keep it afloat, so it looks like it's actually working. Now, President Trump said he's not going to give them money, but that's just not how it's going to work. They're going to find ways to get money from the federal government. They will find ways. And then if God forbid a Democrat gets back in office, they'll float it again, and we will be on a full-fledged movement towards socialism in America. I now sound like an alarmist, but I'm telling you, the ingredients. If you're baking a pie, you have all the ingredients. We have all the ingredients to bake this pie, so we need to be praying accordingly. And the rabbis, I think over 100 rabbis in New York, have called for to stand against Mandani, not just because he's a Muslim, but because of his statements, his murderous calls to the globalized, the Intifada, which he was a part of. He's being sourced by Soros, who's paying for his campaign, by radical imams, money from Qatar. I know that his mom was a film producer, and almost all of her funding came from Qatar. So this is the man we're looking at. So this is going to be an effect to the Jewish people for sure, and New York has a lot of Jewish people, so that's a big issue in that. Okay, you want to say anything to that before we shift?
Yeah, his speech this last week about complaining about how Arabs were treated after 9/11, and him saying that Trump wants there to be another line 9/11 or whatever he said. I can't remember exactly the thing that he said. I listened to it a few days ago. The reality is he's trying to position himself to be this like moderate. And I think somebody talked about how he lost the debate is he's being asked about his positions on things and he's saying in some major positions for the voters in New York. And his stance is, well, I haven't taken a position on that. It's basically you got to vote me in before you see who I
Yeah.
am.
Yeah.
And that's the alarming thing. We're seeing that now with Obamacare. And so for the New Yorkers there is they got to wake up. And reality is look, there are consequences to the elections. And if they elect this guy, then the rumor is that, okay, he's going to raise taxes within the state 2% to pay for all this stuff. One, he legally doesn't have the authority to pay for that, or say that you can raise 2% taxes in the entire state to pay for everything in one big giant city. So the question is like, okay, how is he actually going to kind of come across this? And there are some the problem is there are some New Yorkers, who are moderates, i.e., comedian Andrew Schultz, who brought him on his podcast and said, hey, yeah, we want all these things. We want our New Yorkers to have all their benefits and all that stuff. And that's part of the problem. Is these guys are easily persuaded, they care about certain things, and idealistically it seems right. But these guys are not thought leaders, but they're going out here saying this stuff and people are listening. That's the problem. This goes back to the original point of view is, Trump won partially because he was able to reach out to this podcast generation and go on all these podcasts and reach them. And that's kind of the new wave of media, which is why we're here. But there's also a lot of sifting that's going on right now where people are having to decide who are the people to listen to. And the problem is you have comedians getting into politics, and bleeding over into things in economics that are affecting everyday lives rather than just being comedians and talking about funny things. And the issue is they're being brought in as experts on a subject matter and they barely know the history and the the policies, the ideas that they're talking about. And that's concerning because these young kids are listening to them as, oh, these guys are policy experts. When in reality, those young kids have probably done more research than the people that they're listening to, which is sad. And there's a depending on who you listen to and what studies you look at, there's a thing of, well, the young people are going left, but then there's also some that are showing young men are going right, college kids. And so, and that's one of the things Charlie did great about. I know somebody asked a question thinking that Erica Kirk was going to take over. She took over his CEO spot, and they're still determining who's basically going to be the speaker. And it's ultimately going to have to be more than one person. But the reality is after Trump, where does the Republican Party go? I know you mentioned before Clay Nash. There's a lot. I said it last week. There's a lot of concerns on one where he stands on Israel, but then two is there's a lot of unknowns with him. I mean, we've seen him for in the public eye for not that long, and he was an anti-Trump guy before. And okay, yeah, he came around because of his friendship with Don Jr., but there's still a lot of concerns there with his religious belief. What does he believe? Is he Catholic? Is he Hindu? With his wife, and a lot of different things. I mean, everybody can love his story of where he came from, but the question is as a leader of the free world, where does he stand on a lot of issues? And that's something I think we got to pray about and pray that the American people realize and look for. And look, it's going to start in the church. And I think Charlie was right about that. Is like these American pastors, and I think with the passing of Charlie Kirk, one of the fruits have been good fruits of it is people are realizing, okay, you told us this stuff wouldn't happen. There are even people who we listen to and we like, who said the things that are happening right now with the aggression towards the church, from the Biden administration to the political left, wouldn't happen, aren't happening, are not a concern, and yet here we are.
Okay, well that covers that topic. Now we'll close out today's show with government shutdown. We know we're heading toward a major crisis this week. November 1 is a big marker, which is Saturday, because of so many things that are happening financially. As you know, a billionaire financed the government's payment of the soldiers for the October 15 payout. They're actually working on another payout the first of the month from another donor. So that's something that they're working on. But now you have 41 million people that are on food stamps that come November 1, that will be cut off. Now, these are majority of people on those stamps, obviously, are Democrats and vote for Democrats because the Democrats threaten them. If you don't vote for us, you won't have this free opportunity, welfare, et cetera. So we're hoping that they will put pressure on their Democratic congressmen and senators to push this thing through this week. We'll see how that plays out. It doesn't mean it's all over either. There's a budget coming up after this. This is just a continued resolution and to get to the budget. So we have a whole nother issue even after that. So this is going to be really serious because now you're going to hit really the grassroots movement of America, especially for the Democrats. You're going to start hitting your grassroots people who can just continually vote for you. So Mike Johnson made a statement of what he believes is happening to the Democratic Party through this. Let's see what he has to say about his view on this.
What we're witnessing is truly the end of the Democratic Party as we've known it. And even some Democrats are now saying that out loud. You can see it in their interviews. I watched one last night. All this is directly related to the Democrats' shutdown show. Why? Because just like they decided to save their own skin, that they had to endorse the Marxist Mandami in an unprecedented move, they have also decided they had to shut down the government in an unprecedented move. No matter the pain it inflicts upon hardworking American people, they were simply more afraid of the Marxists in their party than they are of voters.
And I think that's the true statement right there. He is more afraid of the Marxists, they should say, than they are of the voters. And this is where I think the Democrats have done for years is take for granted their base. They have always felt their base would never leave them and would always be with them. I live in a state that is a city that's predominantly Democrat. And I can tell you when they don't show up for 4 years and then they show up right before elections and tell them when they go in their Section 8 housing and all their subsidies that they have, look, if you don't vote for us, the Republicans are going to take that all away from you. And yet their core values, those people's core values are much like ours. But because of that financial threat, and we're seeing this with the tariffs, President Trump is using tariffs to move nations. When you talk money, you will move people. And that's what's happening in this situation. So, as we see, Mike, I think Speaker Johnson, I think he makes a great point here. This is possibly the end of the Democratic Party.
And the thought line of this is the current leadership in Democratic Party, which doesn't exist, those who are in these positions, Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, more so Schumer, is being pressured by the likes of AOC and the far left with progressives within the left party. And so the thought line is this: is if the Schumer and Jeffries can show the far left, quote unquote, voters in these big cities, New York, Chicago, LA, that they're just as radical as the young bunch who's coming up and rising and trying to take their spot, then hopefully these people will vote for them. The other reality is that same older leadership understands this doesn't play nationwide. This plays in local economies where you can have questionable voters who aren't necessarily U.S. citizens, and so that's why obviously the right is trying to fight that, rightfully so. And there are even those on the left who are very concerned about that moving forward, and even those who have voted Democrat who are saying, "Hey, we're being replaced." And whereas the young up and comers are saying, look, we have to do this, we have to give this stuff out. So now, with the only way for them to do anything right now, because they don't have any full voting authority in the House or Senate, they're just like, we're going to shut it down. And so this falls back to the American people of, do we buy this nationwide? As far as, because what's going to happen come the midterms is they're going to say, well, Republican leadership was in charge of the House and in the Senate. It's their fault. It's their responsibility to pass a budget. They didn't want to come to the table. They didn't want to talk. We've seen this over and over and over again. The real question is, are the American people going to buy it? And I think something that's very good and interesting to see is, I want to share this, is when it comes to Melee in Argentina, how he won a big midterm vote of things swinging towards his party, towards his line of how he wants to run the country, because what he's doing in Argentina is working as far as tearing down inflation, cutting government costs, the overall economy, of helping Argentina. And it shows the positive hopefulness. The reason I want to show this is it shows that, okay, the left's going to try to do certain things, i.e. in Argentina, but the reality is okay, the people of Argentina saw through it, and they voted him in via free and fair elections. And so I think here in America, that's a hopeful thing for us to see, this wave that's coming across the nations who are just, they're tired of this stuff. You're seeing it happen in Europe as well. They're tired of the open borders. They're tired of their women and children being taken advantage of, their economy being destroyed. And so the real question is nationwide, what happens to the Democratic Party moving forward?
I know it looks complicated, but it's not. Last Tuesday, the country was rocking along, minding its own business. Our budget ended at midnight. A few weeks before we'd gone, our Democratic friends said, must vote to keep it open for about 6 weeks. They said, no, we won't do it. We'll shut it down unless you give us $1.5 trillion. And we said, well, that's not going to happen. That'll happen when donkeys fly. You know that. So they keep voting no to open it up. All we're saying is open it up, no strings attached, so we can continue to negotiate. And they say not until you give us $1.5 trillion, which we're not going to do. And that's what's going on.
Everybody is done.
So there's I know it sounds so simple what he just said there, but that is where we are right now. It's 1.5 trillion that they want. And then when you look, Senator Kennedy in the Senate broke it down what this money is for. It's for transgenders. It's for all these programs, transgender issues in other nations, et cetera. And of course, the Obama subsidies to increase that and continue that along the way, which includes transgender care, et cetera, et cetera. This was never a part. The people of America voted not to have that part of the budget, and they're saying we want it. And it's stupid because it's not their base. The people really in their party don't even want that stuff as a whole, but it's part of their agenda. So this is a big battleground that's playing out. And as they keep trying to do that now, Steve Bessett adds a little bit more to this, which I think will help us as well understand a little bit. Let me play this clip, which he says is, where we stand or what needs to happen in the situation.
And today is day 26. I know you have been over there, but there has been a government shutdown here. People are suffering. Federal employees are starting to go to food banks. Any light at the end of the tunnel on that? Should the president be meeting with Democrats again?
Well, what good does it do, Martha? They've dug in. The American people are hostage to Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries' poll numbers, because what's changed between now and the last time there was a clean continuing resolution is Chuck Schumer has tanked in the polls. Both of the two guys from Brooklyn, like I call them, are worried about being primaried from the left. 52 Republican senators have voted 11 times to reopen the government. 3 brave, moderate Democrats have come across the aisle. So, I call on moderate Democratic senators to end this craziness. You'll be heroes. Because, Martha, what I can tell you is we managed to find the money in the middle of October to pay our brave service members. And I think we'll be able to do it on November 1st. But we're going to be out of money on November 15th. And, for a military not to get paid is a disgrace. The other thing that's happening is this is starting to eat into the economy, starting to slow the economy. And we're also starting to see there's a problem with air traffic control. So it's starting to slow down our nation's travel.
But Secretary Bessent, I should add that the president's party, your party, controls the White House and both chambers of Congress. You don't think you bear any responsibility for this?
There it is.
Margaret, what can we do? What can we do for this desperate act that we can call on them to change their minds? Because I can tell you, the 1.5 trillion in spending that they're calling for, that's not on the table. We inherited a mess. We inherited the worst budget deficit to GDP when we weren't in a recession and we weren't at war. It was 6.4, 6.5%. We've managed to bring that down to 5.9%, and we're not going to let them be irresponsible with the budget again.
Okay, thanks for joining us.
Okay, so you want to comment on that?
So he talked about it. What they inherited is what they're asking for are continuations of COVID funding for Obamacare. And if you remember, going back to Obamacare, it was supposed to lower your premium, not increase your premium. You're supposed to get more coverage, not less coverage. And literally everything they said was wrong. It goes back to Nancy Pelosi's famous quote of, you got to pass it to see what's in it. I mean, just the most absurd thing ever. And they're wanting, and I think things you pointed out before are exactly true, of just the nonsense that the American people are saying, we do not want this. And I think it's great on the Trump administration. And look, I think if you look at what happened with Margaret Thatcher in Great Britain, when she turned around their economy, is she dealt with some of the similar things. Is she kind of put her foot down and she said, look, we can't do these things. Basic business sense is you can't keep overspending what you're bringing in. And Bessent right there is saying, look, we can't keep doing this. We're $37 trillion in debt and climbing. Something has to give. Like, we have to stop somewhere. And it starts here with these things. And you heard it there, is Democrats and in the news media, they're going to say this is Trump's fault. And in reality it's not. We have to look at this as responsible Americans. And for every American who's ever said, why doesn't Congress get its act in order? This is finally what it takes to get its act in order. There are senators who are in Washington, D.C. right now trying to deal with this, because ultimately it comes down to Schumer in the Senate to get this passed so that they get something back to the House to vote for. And Leader Thune, who's a Republican from North Carolina, he promised to put 8 bills on the House floor to get them vote to try to get this ball rolling. He's done that. The Democrats had voted no, just like Bessent said, because they want this $1.5 trillion to go towards Obamacare, towards things which in the reality of it is the people who are on Obamacare are only 25 million people, because when Obamacare was being pushed out, it was saying that, so many Americans. And at the time, it was like only 30 million Americans. And now it's down to 25 who are actually on it, because they're getting healthcare through their jobs. There's other platforms, self-pay healthcare that they can get on Medicaid, Medicare. Like, there's other avenues for them to get this quote unquote healthcare rather than letting the government get more and more involved. And it's been a disaster for the hospitals that have done it. And a lot of them, they're not taking patients who do this because of the amount of paperwork that are there, which cost of people leaving as well. So just a whole slew of things. And so great on Bessent, even though there are some things we don't agree with him on, is standing up and saying, look, we have to stand up and say, Enough's enough. $37 trillion in debt and climbing. Like something has to give. Something has to change.
Well,
And so they're trying to do
she
that.
asked the question, what about Trump? And they have the Congress, they have the Senate.
Correct.
Why don't they do this? Okay, they did. Trump presented the bid budget. The House passed it. The Senate, has to deal with it. They 53, all the Republicans voted for it. They've done all that they can do. It's now because of the 60 vote margin that's nothing that the Republicans can do anything about. That is a set, unless you break the filibuster, which we don't want to see. We want to see that stay in place, because if not, when the Democrats, if they ever get back in power, they'll use that against us that way. So it's a safeguard that needs to stay there. And so they've done all that they can do. So that's such a stupid question. And then they say no kings, no kings. And then she makes a statement, others do as well. Let's bring back the king, get Trump here and make him do the right thing. That's what a king does. Well, he's not the king. This is a responsibility of the Congress to budget, to do this whole thing. And the question was there, what is the Lord saying about this? I think the Lord's revealing the hidden things and the motives of the Democratic Party right now. And for that, I'm thankful for. What I hate is the people that are suffering for this. That's the hard part about it. And it's already happening. Air traffic controllers and others are starting to find second jobs because they need to
A lot
pay
of them are calling out sick as well.
They're calling sick in, and then they'll go get a second job. They'll do something online or something, whatever, because they got to pay bills. They got to pay their bills and everything that they're doing. And so you mark it. If by this weekend we do not see a budget resolution, you're going to see canceled flights. You're going to see delays everywhere because they can't. They're already overworked. They're
Ports
already
of entry. Oh, that's a big thing. People don't realize.
Our friends that came here from Colombia this weekend, they diverted them to Miami because the customs shut down in Atlanta for 5 hours. So there was nobody to run them through customs. So they had to fly them to another city and then catch other connections along the way. Well, that's going to start growing. Burbank, a couple of weeks ago, they closed the airport for 6 hours. They didn't have workers. So they just shut it down. And that's going to happen. And you talk about chaos. I travel a lot. You talk about chaos, because that's the economy of America. Those most of the airplanes that I fly on, almost half or more of every airplane is a business person. They're going to work in their business jobs everywhere they go. So it's going to affect the economy in so many different ways. But I think the revelation of what the Democrats are all about, the Marxist thing that Mike Johnson just spoke about, is so true. And that gets into the whole, they want to take over Congress, because if they take over Congress through all the illegal immigration and having the census change, all that. Matter of fact, I heard Arnold Schwarzenegger, they pushed him on this. Let me play this little clip. I think it's a good clip about that gerrymandering that's coming up in California as well. This is a great clip from Schwarzenegger.
As you acknowledged, this all started because of redistricting in Texas, and this was Trump pushing Republican-controlled states to throw out their current congressional maps so as to cook the books, so that it is less likely for Democrats to retake control of the House during the next year midterms. I mean, is it fair to argue that do you believe that the Republican Party is starting this?
No, Jake. There has been gerrymandering going on for 200 years. There is such extreme gerrymandering going on that in a state like Massachusetts, that has like 40% of the people voting for Trump, they have 0 representatives. The Republican Party has 0 representatives sent to the House. Think about that. In New Mexico, 45% of the people voted for Trump and voted Republican, and 0 is sent to the House. 0 representatives from the Republican Party. So there's gerrymandering, crazy gerrymandering going on all over the country. And we wanted to try to stop it in California, and we did stop it in California, and we went around the country. So I think this whole thing about finger pointing and say they did it, so therefore we should doing it, that's not really the way to go. The one party should outperform the other party. It should be performance. And when it comes to midterm elections, as you know, always the party that is not in the White House usually wins by 20, 25, 30 seats. So what does 5 seats matter in the first place in Texas? It is crazy. We should outperform them. That is where the action is.
Well, took a foreign citizen for who became an American to get us right on that issue, to look back at our 200 plus years and see this has been going on for a long time. And it is ridiculous. And we presented this to you. The Louisiana cases before the Supreme Court. They argued it this month, and ruling probably won't happen until next summer. But that will be a landmark decision, because by the Constitution, and look, we want free, fair representation, but by the Constitution, you cannot make a district based on race. You're not allowed to do that by the Constitution. Now, they felt when they started doing gerrymandering for racial representation that it would be a temporary thing, just to kind of straighten things out and start having a better view and watch minorities, be in Congress and do a good job. But it has not been temporary. It's become a permanent issue. And that's what that case is about. And what he's saying here, and it brings us back to the budget issue, if we don't if we allow this gerrymandering to continue and still silence the voices, here we are a majority in the nation and not have a voice. California's a classic example, where it was just there for 2 weeks. They have the most Republicans in one state of all the states in America. California does. Yet they're going to gerrymander their voice away from them and make sure that the Democrats are the main voice. And you don't know how frustrating, when I talk to the people there, how it is to live among people like our conversation here. They talk to people like that every day. They have the same conversations we're having. Many of them are watching us right now. And then they have to live in a state that doesn't believe that way. They have to subject themselves to that because of what the libs have done, what the Democrats have done in that state. So this is a big, big issue, and it affects the budget, because if they do get these seats, and let's say they win the Congress, which is a likely, but not likely, it's a possibility. They could actually get the Senate back too in 28. This could happen again. And what we're going to have a quagmire beyond what you ever thought you could ever see. And all Trump will be able to do is veto, 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 but we will continue, the debt will continue to rise, and we will go down a hole that I don't know that we can ever get out of.
Yeah, I talked about it last week. The if California does those 5 seats, I think the swing is like 24 Republicans throughout the states, between Texas, Missouri, Kansas, um, Indiana, Ohio, that are going to swing the other way to kind of make up for it, which is why New York and California are going to do it, because there was some information leaked out, or that came out from the Supreme Court, about, hey, they're leaning towards going against the racial gerrymandering of the lines, and so that's going to put everything up in the air. And so what we're seeing play out here is, again, on the surface, of they're playing the game of media here, and the question is how valid is mainstream media versus the new age media, and then how are people listening to it and are digesting it. And the hopes of this is for the Democrat. This is how the Democrats are playing. Is the hopes is they think the American people are too dumb, aren't going to listen to what they're saying. They're paying into the low information voter, of not paying attention right now, because when it comes to midterms, most people probably won't go to the voting booth. In 2028, they got another handle. They're just trying to survive until 26 to possibly get back in power and reposition themselves, because they're doing the very things now that they blame Republicans for doing, which is quite interesting. And so the reality is, do the American people see it? Do what Trump's saying? Oh, the economy is roaring. It's rolling. Will the SNAPs benefits that you talked about, that are for low income families who need it to survive? And there are those. If you go on your bank website, I think pretty much every bank that I've seen has things out there that, hey, if you're affected by the government shutdown, let us know. Mortgage. This has happened before. Mortgage companies can understand this. They can give you a pause. Furlough doesn't mean that you don't have to pay your mortgage and things like there. Companies, capitalism is working to help those who are affected by this, and military as well. You have people donating. I mean, just the American spirit there. is amazing to see rise up to help support fellow Americans rather than see them harm. But the reality is it will have ramifications, I think, that we don't even fully understand, because this is already the longest government shutdown, and continuing every day it goes by, every second it goes by, it only grows and grows and grows. And the question is will the American people rise up and say enough's enough from this leadership? Because there are even those within the Democratic Party that could be put in these positions where these people are and challenge them. But is will what voice rises forward? Is it the far left progressive, or is it those, which I think, I know we talked about it before, Rick Joyner's word of the wings of the eagle and going too far right.
Exactly.
And so I think this is what we're seeing happen right before our very eyes.
And so the data, I was listening to somebody, I don't have the sources, I shouldn't probably say this too much, but over, I think it was 53% of Christians voted in the last election. And that is, of the registered Christians, only half of them vote. And that was still the 53%. So imagine what would happen if we actually got out and voted our conscience and voted biblically. And a lot of people say, well, all we got to do is get the Christian vote out. The problem is that Christians are so divided on so many issues that the church has gone so liberal in so many areas that I don't know that I want them in the voting booth. You know what I'm saying? If I have the all the Methodists and all those people, the Episcopals and others who have now gone woke, I don't want them in the poll. So that's where we have to say, okay, God, get the right people out to vote accordingly so that we can see this. Now, this Prop 50, pray about that. It's the California proposition. When I was out there, I saw signs everywhere. I talked to many people about it. The commercials that they put on California, I watch television a little bit, it just out and out lies, basically saying Trump's a king and he wants to rule totalitarianism and et cetera, et cetera. And this Prop 50 will keep America safe. I mean, those are the type of commercials they were coming up with. Just flat lies and exaggerations on so many different levels. But that's what they live under. And I feel sorry for them out there. I really do. But let's pray that Prop 50 and then Schwarzenegger's being a big part of a movement to campaign against that. And that won't happen because they can't actually gerrymander without the people's approval. And if that happens, then okay, they'll gerrymander based on the population. And where's the main population? San Diego, Los Angeles, San Francisco. Those are your main population. And they're all liberals. So they're going to control the vote for the most part. So let's pray for those three cities, especially San Diego, San Fran, and Los Angeles, that there be a rise in this. Somebody said Cheon's running for governor. He's not doing well in the polls at all. I love Cheon. I love his heart. It doesn't look good for him, just being honest with you. We can pray that we still got a long time to go. I think it's next year the election is. There is another candidate named Hilton. He's a Republican. He actually is leading in the polls right now against every Democrat candidate. So most likely, if they're going to see a Republican, it would be him. I think Cheon can bring a voice to the race, but I pray he does the right thing. Let's see what God does in that situation. Here's a problem, and you probably ain't gonna like me saying this, but many in the church are against Cheon, especially cessationists, because he's spirit-filled and he moves in the gifts of the Spirit. And the Higgs, the other guys, the big leaders, Christian leaders in California, are not supporting him because of his because of his spirit-filled belief. That's sad. But that's the reality that's going on in California. I got to run. Zach, you want to close out for us today?
I think Cheon adding a voice is good. Steve Hilton, he's a good voice, something to look at and be moderately supportive of, and understanding that he's not as bad as might be out to be. But California has a lot on their hands there, and so when we see these things happening and see what California is doing, it can be very disastrous, because if it succeeds, other states are going to try to copycat it once they get into these positions of power. You're going to look at Colorado, Texas, the mass exodus from California, Nevada. Concerning movement, if it goes that direction, hopefully the people in California can get out, vote. And so we just want to make you guys aware of these things. That's why we're here. That's why we're standing on the wall, praying for this nation, and making sure we're all informed and have the knowledge at hand as we seek to navigate this season that we're in and not being led astray by falsities and a false narrative that is being pushed out there as the shift is away from mainstream news media into allowing many voices, as we're in the decade of the voice, to speak out and to offer points of view that might not otherwise been there. And where we differ is not only do we want to provide that, but we want to pray as well. Pray into this. Pray for the leadership of Speaker Johnson, obviously President Trump. He's not a perfect man. And being that Mike Johnson's from our district, we want to support him and pray for him and pray for the leadership that's there, and also see down the road what's coming. These things that are easy to see, in our opinion, because we've been doing this for a while, and understanding, okay, this is the battle ahead. This is where we're going, and understanding the times and seasons that we're living to be like the sons of Issachar. And so we thank each and every one for following along. We'll be back again next week. Don't forget our noon prayer tomorrow. And then we also have our Wednesday night service back again this week after having our Columbia crew here all the way from Bogota. So blessings each and every one of you. Thank you for following along today as we close out, and we will see you guys next week. Have a good one.